video is over lesson 2 from chapter 19, and this is part 1 of that video. It's about factoring, quadratics, and solving. Okay, so we need to know a couple of terms before we dive into factoring. So we need to know that binomial means that we have two terms, so two pieces basically. So an example would be 3x squared plus 11. There's two terms. A trinomial is three terms. So for example, 4x squared minus 5x plus 3. And then the zero product property would be if a times b equals 0, then a equals 0 or b equals 0. Alright, so our notes from this section. So let's go ahead and review standard form, which we talked about last section. It's just ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And then let's go ahead and talk about what factoring is. So here's just an example from something you can probably relate to. Two factors of 6 are 2 and 3 because the product of 2 times 3 is 6. So in the same sense, the factors of x squared plus 3x plus 2 are x plus 1 and x plus 2 because when you multiply them together, you get x squared plus 3x plus 2. So let's use this zero product property and the factored form to solve some quadratics. So take a look at example 1. This has already been factored. We have two factors of the quadratic. And so basically we use our zero product property that says if we're multiplying two things together and it equals 0, then we can set the factors equal to 0 and solve, and we'll get our x's. So in this first factor, x equals -1, and in this factor, x equals 3. So same sense, let's look at b. I'm going to solve for x after we set each factor equal to 0. So each set of parentheses, each piece gets set equal to 0. On this first one, we'll add the 3, divide by 2, and that is not going to reduce, so we'll just have 3 halves. And on this second one, we'll subtract 5 from both sides, so x will equal -5. So we have two solutions, 3 halves and -5. So you look at it, C, it's going to be the same thing. So for this time, we have a set of parentheses around that first factor. It's just x equals 0. 4x minus 1 equals 0. We're going to add 1. Divide by 4. So x equals 1/4. So those are our two solutions there. So how do we factor it? How do we get those factors like we have in example 1? Well, let's take a look at example 2. And we will learn how to factor. So there's a couple parts to this video, and the first part is when a equals 1. So taking a look at that standard form, when the number in front of x squared is 1, this is how we factor. And we should have an equals 0 on the end there. So go ahead and put that in. Okay, so we are going to do two sets of parentheses. Remember, when you're multiplying these binomials, these sets of parentheses, you do that everybody meets everybody. So we're kind of keeping that in mind here. These first two things, these right here, have to multiply together to give us x squared. It's just going to be x and x. These two numbers right here have to multiply to get 16 and add to get -10. And so what I do is I make a list of all the factors of 16. Now, if the number that you're trying to multiply to get is positive, then you're looking at the sum of the factors. So we have 1 and 16. Well, 1 plus 16 is 17, not 10. So that's not it. We have 2 and 8. 2 plus 8 does equal 10. But we need it to equal -10. Well, since they have to multiply to give us a positive, it's going to be -2 times -8. So we're just going to put those two numbers in here. When this sign is positive and this is negative, both of these will be negative. Now, it's factored. So we're going to go ahead and Oh, actually, I misread our directions here. On this first set, all we're doing is factoring. So when we're solving, that's when we would set equal to 0 and go from there. But we're not doing that quite yet, so just got a little ahead of myself. Okay, so let's go ahead and factor b. So once again, there's no number in front of x squared besides 1, so we're going to do our two sets of parentheses. We have our x and our x. And these two numbers have to multiply to get negative 26 and add to get negative 11. Since we're multiplying to get a negative, we are looking for two numbers whose difference is 11. So 1 and 26, the difference between those two is 25. 2 and 13, the difference between them is 11, which is what we're looking for. Now we have to figure out which one has to be negative to add to negative 11. In order to multiply to get a negative number, we have to have one positive, one negative. And so which one has to be negative to give us negative 11? That would be negative 13. So we have positive 2 and negative 13. Okay, let's take a look at C. So our two sets of parentheses, we have our x